something that when you are talking to someone and let's say like the person that you're talking to has an opposing view to yours, instead of just automatically assuming that you are 100% right and that they're just stupid or that they are completely wrong and how dare they think that way, give them 5 minutes. Let them sell the idea to you. Don't just listen silently and then just still disregard everything that they're saying. Like you should always just give give them the time to just really sell it to you and just try to think how they're thinking about the topic you're discussing. You never know, you could surprise yourself and just realize that you were wrong about something, or maybe your opinion has kind of just shifted where you kind of have a new perspective about it, or even just it just stays the same, but at least like you give the person the time and you're open to just different suggestions, even though it's totally against what you originally believed. So giving 5 minutes is really important before just blowing off the other person. The work required to have an opinion. So before I go into my overall thoughts, I want to start with a quote. You're not entitled to take a view unless and until you can argue better against that view than the smartest person who holds that opposite view. If you can argue better than the smartest person who holds the opposite view, that is when you are entitled to hold a certain view. Charlie Munger. I think that's just awesome advice, especially for younger generations. I think a lot of times younger people tend to just do a little bit of research or do a lot of research on just one side and just stick with that and not change their mind at all, or not even consider the other side. They're just very stuck in their ways. When you talk to someone like that, I mean, oftentimes you don't really want to give them the time of the day because they're not even considering your side of the view, or even just knowing the other side. So another example of this too is just with protesters. I think a lot of times when you see protesters on the news, you'll just see these people just chanting and just even shouting sometimes at the other person or the other side that they're protesting against of their beliefs. But what you'll notice is that they don't let any room for any other comment back to them. So they're very one-sided. They want to like force you to almost believe what they believe because they're being aggressive and they're chanting at you. However, does that ever work? To me, it doesn't. You know, when someone is yelling at me or trying to like totally disregarding everything I'm saying to them, and they're just very one-sided, why would I respect their opinion? You know, why would I trust their beliefs over mine? Like, no one's going to listen to you if you are just one-sided or you don't even like know the other side. You should be an expert on both sides. So when you do come across someone that believes differently than you, it's not just like, oh, this is how it is and that's how I view it and I'm right. Instead, it's just like you can encourage someone to do even further research, or even convince someone that they might be wrong about a view that you're holding. I just think that people will take you more seriously if you really understand both sides and are able to calmly and patiently talk to someone about it. I think that just shows a lot of respect to the other side, and if you're showing respect to the other side is going to respect you. You have no idea how wrong you are. Now, that's a bold statement. What does that mean? It means that we as humans are mostly wrong in our lives. But if you think about it, most philosophers were wrong throughout their entire lives. They come up with these discoveries and they're brilliant, but at some point there is still like some error in there where it's like after a couple years or thousands of years even of people just researching their work, they figured out that they were actually wrong about this. Example is Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton did a lot of research on universal laws. So he thought that gravity was a part of a universal law. So we've all heard the term that he is well known for is that everything that falls must come down, right? Well, what about in space, right? In space, there's no gravity. So he was wrong about that. And it's really crazy to think that these amazing, intelligent men, especially like Albert Einstein, Socrates, or even Isaac Newton, were wrong. But if they weren't wrong, how would we have discovered or done further research in what they were researching? So if they never took the time to research, even though they might have known that they were wrong from the get-go, how would we have even learned about some of this stuff? Here's an awesome quote. We are too incapable to realize how incapable we are. So we don't know enough to know that we don't know enough. It's kind of an interesting quote to wrap your mind around, but if you take a couple minutes to think about it, it's just really fascinating. We as humans tend to overestimate ourselves. A lot of times we'll think that we're really like experts on one subject or something like that, and we actually know like the bare minimum. A lot of times people too have the desire to be at a certain point in their career, and they don't really realize why. But the point is, the reason why that they're not in that higher place in their career is because they simply don't know enough. They don't have enough experience, right? So we as humans need to do trial and error. We need to try and fail. We need to fail. Many people, even like Apple, it's like Apple did not create the iPhone in a day, right? Apple started with computers, and then they moved on to cell phones. And even with the iPhone itself, they aren't done modifying it. They're still improving it to this day. And there's about 10 iPhones out, like 10 different versions. That's ridiculous. That's so crazy. But yet technology is still improving. There's still area for improvement. So you can be incredible and you can do a lot in your life, but don't be afraid of failure. If you don't have something right, your life is not worthless. It is worthy. Like, you have so much going for you that you can do so much research. You can use your gifts, and everyone has their own gifts and talents that you can add value to the world. So don't underestimate that. We as humans have so much room for limitless discovery and creation. So go out there, don't pigeonhole yourself, and just discover, and don't be afraid to fail, because you will pick yourself up again. Why philosophers make formidable entrepreneurs. This article was super interesting, but I'm going to go over a couple of bullet points first. Philosophers seek to structure the world, are deeply analytical, strive to find deeper truths, like to argue, and aren't afraid to take risk. Wow, I don't know about you, but I know many people who have these characteristics, but don't go and start their business. So they might be deeply analytical, they might like to argue, but they are extremely afraid of taking a risk, and that's what stops them. Here's the truth. You might not be analytical. You might not like to find the deeper truths, or you just don't think that's a strength of yours. It can totally be a strength of yours. You just have to put forth the effort into it. So if you're not analytical, surround yourself with people who are, read more, and just do what analytical people do and try to gain that skill. That might not be like your best strength, but it could be. So why not go for it? Like, if you just think that you just aren't any of these, you can totally be these. Anyone can start their business. You can start it. And philosophy is just a great way to start. Philosophy helps us understand deeper meanings, right? So if you're looking at all these characteristics are of people who look at the big picture. People who majored in this in college had a big picture in mind. So if you're only looking at one line or one brushstroke on a picture instead of the whole picture, what are you doing? Don't just focus in on how you're not analytical and not start your business because of that. Look at the full picture, look at the potential, and you will find success. Go for it. Philosophers on philosophy. Now, this podcast was kind of a hit and miss to me. I thought it was pretty long, and I didn't think it really needed to be all that long, and it just wasn't something that I found super interesting. Now, I can understand why someone might think it's very interesting, and I think what I did find interesting from this was that everyone has their own definition of what philosophy is. But it's one of those things where it's like everyone can define something in their own way. So yeah, philosophy is not the easiest thing to define, but you can define it in your own way. And the people that did, some of my favorite examples was this one guy that said, philosophy is like thinking about thinking. Boom. That's all you have to say. There's not really much more to it, right? Another guy said, wow, philosophy, I don't even know if I can define it. But here's a joke. And that's great too. People learn in different ways. People take things in different ways. And that's like the main point of it. So I didn't think it had to be that long. It probably could have been cut in half because I got the point right from the get-go. And there were some definitions I was like, wow, this is kind of like a little too elaborate. Like, it doesn't have to be this complicated. Like I said with my first example, all you really need to say about philosophy is thinking about thinking. But then again, everyone has their own definition. So if your definition is different from that, great. But my overall point is you don't really need to stress about it. Brian Kaplan on why hypothetical thinking matters. So this one was kind of a hit and miss too. So I'm just going to actually read a quote first from his article and then just give more comments after that. So if you could save either one American or X foreigners, how big would X have to be before you'd save the foreigners? That's a very broad question. There's not a lot of detail in it. And I think a lot of people, and this is what I was thinking when I read it too. I was like, well, that's not really a fair question because who are these foreigners? Like, are they terrorists? Are they, anything that would cause harm to Americans? Or is it like is the American a bad person? Like, you don't know. So I guess you just need more details on that. And I think some people would maybe even say, oh, I would say the 15 people for sure, because that's more lives than just the one American. But we don't know if they're going to cause more harm later on in life. And he makes that point where it's like, we as adults will sometimes just be quick to answer. And it's very true. And he said, even in another example throughout his article, was that as children, we often do think hypothetically, and we do push our teachers and our parents to think like that with us. And a lot of times when we were kids, we got scolded for that. They told us not to like overthink it. And as adults, that kind of affected us where it's like, we don't think so deeply anymore. So he's just making a point that it's like, as an adult, we should try to think more deeply. And the reason why it was kind of like a miss for me was that it's just very broad. Like, I don't know. It didn't have like a lot of oomph to it where I thought, yeah, I need to think more deeply. I already know that, like, you shouldn't just rush into decisions, So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about it, but that's just my overall thoughts.